night had no moon. The water around the hull was black and perfectly still. Then something scraped the wood from below. 3 sailors ran to the rail. What they saw had no name in any language they knew. It was not a fish. It was not a woman. It had both. The captain wrote it in the log the next morning, not as legend, as incident. His hand was steady. His words were not.
No ship had reported an encounter like this before. Not in the Atlantic, not here, not at anchor in the shadow of the Canary Islands. This is the only recorded mermaid attack in Spanish colonial history. It happened in 1521. Nobody ever explained what came out of that water. Before we begin, hit like, comment where you're watching from, and prepare for a record history never explained. Now, let's get to the video.
The last stop before the deep. In 1521, the Atlantic was still a place of guesswork. Spanish ships left Seville with ink-stained charts and open questions. The Canary Islands were the last solid ground before the ocean. Every ship stopped there. It was not optional. It was survival. Sailors filled casks with fresh water and loaded salted meat onto groaning decks. The islands were barely tamed Spanish territory. The coastline of Gran Canaria rose in black volcanic cliffs above churning surf. At anchor, a ship felt exposed. The deep sea was close. In 1521, Hernán Cortés had just taken Tenochtitlan. Spain was at its peak. The world felt newly conquered. But sailors knew the truth. Maps lied. Depth charts were invented. The sea had not agreed to be understood. This crew had made this stop before. They knew the currents, the winds, the smell of the island's volcanic soil. What lived beneath the anchorage at night was unknown to them. No pilot book warned them. No prior crew had written it down. The ship carried wool, oil, and tools bound for the colonial ports. 14 men, 1 captain, 1 log. The captain's name is not in the surviving documents. What survives is his account of what happened on the 3rd night at anchor. The entry fills half a page in a cramped Castilian hand. It does not speculate. It does not invoke God. It simply describes. 3 hours after the night watch began, a sound came from the water. Not a wave, not a fish. Something deliberate. The sound repeated. It moved along the hull toward the stern. 2 sailors woke the captain without explanation. He came on deck barefoot. By the time he reached the rail, a 4th man was already leaning over it. What that man saw made him step back without speaking. The captain wrote that the water was clear enough to show something below the surface. He used the word figura, figure, not creature. It moved with the current, but not like anything carried by a current. It had intention. The captain used that exact word, intención. He ordered a lantern lowered on a rope toward the water. The light touched the surface. Whatever was below moved away from it. Then the scraping started, not random, methodical, starting at the bow, moving sternward, like something testing the seams of the hull. The sound lasted. The captain did not retreat. He watched. He listened. He began counting the seconds between each pass along the keel. A sailor named Rodrigo pressed against the wood beside him and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "It knows we are here." The captain wrote that down. He wrote everything down. That was his discipline. Even this. Even Rodrigo's exact words. The night had no wind. The lantern rope swayed without reason. The water below was unbroken except for what moved through it. After approximately 15 minutes, the scraping stopped. No splash, no departure sound. The thing did not leave. It simply ceased. Nobody slept after that. 2 men drew knives and stood at the rail until dawn. The captain walked the deck in silence. He found no breach in the hull. The water had not entered. Whatever worked at the wood had not broken through. At first light, he lowered the ship's boat and went into the water himself, with a torch and a 2nd man on rope. He inspected the keel. There were marks, parallel and evenly spaced, too regular to be rocks or debris. He did not write what he believed made them. He wrote only what he saw. That restraint is what makes the account unusual. The ship left anchor that morning, 3 days earlier than planned. No reason is given in the log. None was needed. Something had touched the hull in the dark and left marks. The captain filed his report in Seville and said nothing more. The shape below. The carpenter's name was Alonso. He worked at Santa Cruz de Tenerife, 3 days after the ship fled its anchorage near Gran Canaria. He had repaired hundreds of hulls. He knew every mark a sea could leave on wood: rock, barnacle, reef, anchor drag. He lowered himself over the side on a rope harness and examined the marks in morning light. He ran his fingers along each groove. They were parallel, evenly spaced, each approximately a finger's width across. They curved slightly at the end. That detail he could not dismiss. A curved mark meant something flexible had made it. Not a rock, not a barnacle, something that bent as it dragged. His word, flexible. He climbed back on deck and said nothing immediately. He wrote his notes first. Observation before interpretation. That order mattered to him. His official report describes the damage as unusual. He charged the standard rate. He filed the work under routine maintenance. No flag was raised, but he kept a private notebook separate from official records. He had maintained it for 20 years. It was for his own understanding. In that notebook, he described the grooves in detail. He drew a diagram. He measured the spacing and recorded the depth of each mark. He noted that the depth was consistent across all marks, even pressure throughout. As if the thing had maintained exactly the same force. He had seen storm damage, reef damage, rope burn, anchor drag. None of those fit what he was looking at on this keel. In the margin of that page, written later in a different ink, were 3 words. No conozco esto. I do not know this. A craftsman who had seen every wound a sea could produce. He did not know this wound. He sealed the grooves and moved on. He fixed the grooves with tar and oakum. Standard repair. He covered what he could not explain. He charged the standard price. The captain, meanwhile, was asking questions at the harbour. He found the harbour master and asked, had other ships reported strange sounds in this bay? The harbour master had no record of such a report. He checked his own logs that afternoon. Nothing in them matched the captain's description. But the harbour master noted something else. The bay near Gran Canaria had a local name in the remnant Canarian dialect. It translated as the place where the bottom listens. Said the way a practical man repeats what he has been told. The captain wrote this in the personal notes at the back of his log, where pilots kept observations not required for official filing. Those notes were not required to be submitted. Most captains tore them out before handing logs to the registry. This one did not, which is why both versions survive. The official account, dry and factual, and the personal notes, where the captain allowed himself to wonder. In those notes he wrote, "The marks were made by something that knew what it was doing." I do not say this lightly. He was not given to metaphysics. His other personal notes discuss wind patterns, cargo shifts, crew morale, nothing mystical, until this entry. He wrote 3 more sentences. The first asked whether other captains had seen the same and stayed silent. The second asked who would believe him. The third sentence is the one researchers have returned to. It is the sentence Carmen Vidal quoted first in her 1967 note. It reads, "It was not confused by what we were. It understood the ship. It understood that we were inside." That sentence has no scientific counterpart. It is the observation of a man who spent his life reading water and wood and weather. He sealed his log. He submitted it to the Casa de Contratación, the Crown's mandatory shipping registry in Seville. He sailed on. The marks were covered with tar. The note sat in the archive for 446 years. Vidal read it in 1967. She read it twice. Then she began looking for the carpenter's records. She found them in Tenerife. What the islands knew. The Canary Islands had their own knowledge long before the Spanish arrived. The Guanche people had lived there for over 1,000 years. The Guanches were descended from Berber peoples of North Africa. They built in stone, herded goats, navigated by stars, and left no written records. Their knowledge passed entirely by word of mouth. When the Spanish conquered the islands, much of it was lost with the people who held it. But some was recorded. Spanish missionaries and friars in the early colonial years wrote down what they heard from surviving Guanche communities. A Franciscan friar named Bernal documented Guanche coastal warnings in 1493. His manuscript survives in the National Library in Madrid. Among the warnings, certain anchorages were unsafe after dark, not because of rocks or currents, because of what lived in the water beneath. The Guanche term Bernal recorded has been transliterated as something close to Marote. It does not translate cleanly into Spanish. Scholars have offered two interpretations. Those who wait beneath is the most common. Some prefer the watchers below. Neither is confirmed. But the concept is consistent. Something that waited below. Something aware of vessels passing above it in the dark. The location Bernal flagged in his notes corresponds geographically to the anchorage described in the captain's log from 1521. This is not conclusive. The bay is a common stopping point. Many ships anchored there. Most reported nothing unusual. But the coincidence of location across two independent sources, separated by nearly 30 years, has been noted by every researcher who examined both. Carmen Vidal was the first to place them in the same paper. Her 1967 note is 4 pages long and carefully sourced. She also found a third reference. A Spanish soldier on Gran Canaria in 1514 wrote a letter to his brother in Córdoba. The soldier described hearing something at night near the water. He did not investigate. He described the sound as rhythmic and deliberate. He said it was like nails on a door. He said other soldiers had heard it too. Nobody spoke of it the next morning. That letter was personal correspondence, found in a family archive in Andalusia in 1952, unconnected to any formal investigation. Vidal found a reference to it in a footnote in an unrelated academic paper. She tracked down the original letter in its family archive. 3 sources: 1493, 1514, 1521, same location, same sound, same deliberate silence the morning after. The pattern is not proof. Vidal said this directly. She wrote, "I am not arguing for the existence of anything. I argue for the record. The record exists. It is distributed across archives in 3 cities. It was assembled by one researcher with limited funding and 2 subsequent citations. The Guanche people who named that bay are gone as a distinct cultural group. What they knew died with the people who carried it. What survives is the friar's imperfect transcription and a geographic location. The bay, the warning. The name that means something waits beneath. In 1521, the captain anchored there without knowing any of this. He had no access to Bernal's manuscript in Madrid. He had no knowledge of the soldier's letter. He did not know the local name of the anchorage. He arrived with a standard chart. He left with marks in his hull and a sentence in his private notes that centuries of scholarship has not explained. The Guanche warning was never passed to the Colonial Maritime Administration. It was filed under religious ethnography, not navigational hazard. If it had been filed correctly, it might have reached the captain before he dropped anchor. The system that should have connected them did not. Vidal wrote that the failure was institutional. The archive had the information. The archive was not organized to deliver it. 3 sources, 1 location, centuries of silence. A warning sat in a different building while a captain anchored in exactly the wrong bay. The weight of evidence. Carmen Vidal was 34 when she found the captain's log. She was cataloguing 16th century maritime records for a minor grant project. The grant was for 8 months. She spent 3 of those months in the Seville archive, moving through boxes that had not been opened in decades. The logs were bound in deteriorating leather. Most were routine: cargo weights, weather descriptions, deaths at sea, the language of administration. Then she found the captain's log. She recognized immediately that something was different. The handwriting changed in the entry about the 3rd night. Not dramatically. A slight tightening. Letters pressed harder into the page. She noticed it without being a graphologist. Pressure is readable. She photographed the relevant pages and continued cataloguing. She did not stop to follow the thread. She was a professional. She filed a note. 6 months later, after the grant ended, she returned to the photographs on her own time. She translated the full entry and made a list of questions. The first question was whether the mark description had any counterpart in other logs from the same period. She went back to the archive. The archive had no content index, only date and vessel type. She spent 4 weekends reading logs from 1518 to 1525. She found 2 other entries describing unusual sounds at anchor. Neither was in the Canary Islands, one near the Azores, one near Cape Verde. Neither described marks on the hull. Neither described a visible form, but both described the same quality: deliberate, repeated, moving along the hull. She added these to her notes but did not include them in the published paper. Not enough context. She held them back. What she published were the 3 primary sources: the captain's log, the carpenter's notebook, and Bernal's manuscript from 1493. Connecting the friar's manuscript to the other 2 required geographic verification. She consulted a historical cartographer at the University of Seville. The cartographer confirmed the bay coordinates matched within the margin of error of 16th century navigation. Same location, same anchorage. Vidal published her 4-page note in Archivos de Historia Maritima in 1967. The journal had a circulation of about 300. She received 2 citations over the following decade. Neither engaged with her central argument. Both used her as a secondary source for something else. She continued working in the archive for 12 more years. She never found a definitive explanation for the marks. She never stopped looking. In an unpublished essay found among her papers after her death in 2003, she addressed the question she had avoided in print. She wrote that the 3 sources pointed to something real, not supernatural, real. Something that used that bay or passed through it. She wrote that the absence of explanation was itself significant, that sailors who recorded everything had recorded this, that the craftsman had not known this mark. She wrote that the failure to investigate was a failure of institutions. The evidence existed. Nobody had been funded to follow it. The Casa de Contratación archive contains approximately 400,000 documents from the Age of Discovery. A fraction has been fully analyzed. Within those documents, Vidal believed, were more accounts, more captains, more carpenters, more margin notes in different ink, all waiting. She did not have the funding to look. She had 4 pages in a journal that 300 people read. The captain's log remains in the archive in Seville. It is stored with thousands of other documents of identical formal weight. A researcher with access can hold it, can read the cramped Castilian hand on the 3rd night entry, can find the word intención, can run a finger along the edge of the page where the captain pressed harder, can read it and decide what it means. The marks in the wood were sealed with tar. The archive has been open for 500 years. The sea has not been asked again. Vidal died without a conclusion. The question she raised in 4 pages has received 46 words of academic engagement since 1967. The older tradition. Mermaids in the original traditions were not gentle creatures. The romantic image was invented later. The older accounts are records of danger. Pliny the Elder, the Roman naturalist of the 1st century, catalogued mermaid sightings with the same tone he used for lions and elephants. He described bodies washing ashore on the coast of Gaul, covered in scales, not beautiful by any measure, hard-skinned and difficult to name. He wrote that Roman sailors along the Atlantic coast had learned to avoid certain waters at night. He gave no biological explanation. Scottish folklore describes the blue men of the Minch, creatures that boarded vessels from below and dragged sailors into deep water. Norse sagas describe massive forms rising under ships in calm conditions. The sagas functioned as practical warning, not mythology. The Greek sirens of the Odyssey are the most famous example. Homer wrote them as predators. Odysseus had himself tied to the mast. Later generations shifted the imagery toward romance. Half fish, half woman, beautiful and passive. That shift happened between the 10th and 15th centuries. By the 1500s, the romantic image was gaining ground in European art. But the older fear had not left men who worked the sea. Christopher Columbus noted 3 creatures rising from the ocean near Haiti in 1493. He wrote they were not as beautiful as reported. Most historians believe Columbus saw manatees. His language is worth noting, not as beautiful as reported. He expected beauty. He found something else. Henry Hudson, in 1608, recorded in his logbook that 2 crew members saw something in the waters near Norway. He wrote their description the way a pilot records wind direction. From the navel upward, back and breasts like a woman, the tail like a porpoise. John Smith described a mermaid sighting in 1614 off Newfoundland. He found her not unattractive, but clearly non-human in structure. What is notable across these accounts is tone. None were writing fiction. All were professional navigators filing documents under their own names. They saw something. They wrote it down. None were certain what it was. The accounts exist. The names are attached. The dates are recorded. The natural world offers partial explanations. Manatees and dugongs, seen at distance in poor light by exhausted sailors, can suggest a human form. But the Canary Islands account does not fit. The captain did not describe a distant shape. He described something working the hull with intention. The marks on the wood eliminate the possibility of distant misidentification. Something touched the ship. Something that exerted force. Something deliberate. No marine animal known to science produces evenly spaced parallel grooves in submerged timber. The behavior described has no biological counterpart. This is not an argument for the supernatural. It is an argument for an incomplete natural record. The ocean is not finished with its inventory. In 1521, the deep Atlantic had never been measured. Much of it still cannot be surveyed. The sea keeps its own records. What lives at depth, what rises at night, what has come close enough to wooden hulls to leave unexplained marks, remains an open question. The Guanche people answered it with a name: those who wait beneath. The friar wrote it down. The hull confirmed something had been waiting. 300 years of romantic illustration softened the image, took away the scales, added flowing hair, made danger into longing. But before the paintings, before Andersen's fairy tale, before the poets rewrote the sea, there were logs, margin notes, grooves in the wood. The captain of that merchant vessel did not know he was creating a record. He was doing his job. He was writing what he saw. He saw something in the water at night off Gran Canaria. He noted its intention. He filed his log. He never explained it. Neither has anyone else. 5 centuries of maritime scholarship have not produced an answer that fits all 3 sources at once. The older tradition said these waters held something. One captain confirmed it with his pen. The confirmation is still waiting in Seville. What remains unanswered? The archive in Seville is a building of stone and silence. Its documents are organized by date, vessel class, and port of origin. There is no category for the unexplained. Trade records and the account of a captain who watched something work his hull sit together on the same shelves. Vidal's unpublished essay, found among her papers in Madrid, runs to 14 pages. It has never been published or formally released. Researchers who have read it describe a document that moves from evidence to implication with careful, deliberate steps. She did not rush. She asked in the final section, what would constitute proof? What would it take for an institution to treat this account as requiring investigation? Her answer was bleak. A second hull with identical marks from the same location, documented by a qualified professional at a different time. The carpenter's notebook provides that, in a sense. Independent professional documentation of identical marks from the same vessel at a separate location. But Vidal noted the notebook is in a private collection. Access is restricted. It cannot be submitted as formal evidence in any institutional context. This is the structure of the problem. The evidence exists. It cannot be moved. It cannot be officially combined. It waits in separate buildings. The Casa de Contratación was abolished in 1790. Its documents passed to the Archivo General de Indias, where they remain today. That archive has been partially digitized. The 1520s maritime logs have not yet been converted. They require an in-person visit. In-person visits require institutional affiliation and a formal proposal. The archive processes hundreds of requests per year, in order. On one of her 7 visits, Vidal asked an archivist whether the 1520s maritime logs contained unusual content. He paused before answering. He said several logs from that decade had been flagged internally. Administrative flags, he said, related to condition or provenance, not content. Vidal wrote this exchange in her unpublished essay. She noted the flags. She could not determine what they marked. She could not get access. The anchorage near Gran Canaria has been in continuous use since the 1500s. Modern vessels anchor there with sonar and steel hulls. No modern captain has reported unusual sounds. No marine survey has noted anomalous biological activity in that bay at night. But modern surveys are conducted during daylight. Sonar maps the bottom. It does not identify what moves through the water column after dark. What the captain heard in 1521 has no modern counterpart in the record. Absence is not disproof. It is silence. Vidal ended her essay with a question, not a conclusion. She asked, what would it mean if this account were structurally true? What if something in those waters noticed ships, responded to light, and knew where the seams were? What would that require us to admit? She did not answer. She wrote that asking the question seriously was a form of scholarship the institutions had declined to perform. The captain's log has been in the archive for 500 years. The carpenter sealed the marks with tar. The bay kept its old name. The Maraute, those who wait beneath. A Guanche warning never translated into navigational terms, never placed where a pilot could find it. In 1521, a merchant vessel left an anchorage 3 days early because of something that moved with intention through the water at night. That is the factual core. One log, one carpenter, one friar's warning, one location confirmed by independent documents across 3 decades. Nothing has explained the marks. Nothing has identified the shape. Nothing has located a known species that behaves as the captain described. The Atlantic is 3 miles deep in places never surveyed at the biological level. The ocean floor is less mapped than the surface of the moon. The record was made. A captain pressed his pen harder into the page. A carpenter wrote 3 words in different ink. A friar recorded a name. Someone should finish reading it. The record was made in 1521. 500 years later, nobody has.
Some waters keep their witnesses, and history leaves us only the echo.
When fear enters the record, the lesson is humility before what evidence cannot fully name.
Share this story, leave a like, and stay with us for the next mystery. Farewell, with a gentle wave, bye.